Joining me now on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline, Andy McNamara, DraftKings NFL analyst. We got some fantasy football. We're going to talk some betting on the DraftKings Sportsbook app and more. And, of course, Andy works for TSN in Toronto, and he's also a Browns fan, so we got a lot to touch on with Andy here. Andy, how you doing on this Saturday?
I'm doing well, Josh. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. So before we get into anything else, let's get the subjective fan stuff out of the way. So as a Browns fan, what is your realistic expectation for this team? Realistic expectation.
But Josh, that's such a tough question to keep it because we've been, as a Browns fan, you've been in such an emotional roller coaster. So just the faintest sense of joy, you just automatically overreact and think Super Bowl. But if I'm trying to keep it level, I think realistic goal should be to win the division. I'm not considering Baltimore a true challenge. I'm not a believer in Lamar Jackson. I think the Bengals are down and out. And the Steelers, while their defense has improved, I'm not totally sold on Juju Smith-Schuster and James Conner as the true replacement at the same level of Antonio Brown and Le'Veon Bell. So I think the goal for the Browns is, and I've heard it from Freddie Kitchens, their head coach, Meltz, myself, saying that the goal is the division, and I think that should be doable. At the very least, a wild card, but definitely playoffs.
You know, I mentioned the DraftKings Sportsbook app. I have gone on the DraftKings Sportsbook app myself and placed a bet on the Browns to win the division. So, you know, I do believe there is some value in the Browns winning the division. I'm not going to say I'm 100% sold on them, but, you know, look, I do believe there's something to be said with the fact that you can't deny that team has made some legitimate improvements. And when you go on the DraftKings Sportsbook app, you know, right now it's plus 130. It was a little bit less a couple months ago. But, hey, you know what? The Browns winning the division, it's not the most far-fetched thing, especially considering, let's be realistic, Andy, that division always beats each other up. So even if a team wins 9-7, 8-8, you're still winning the division potentially.
Right. It is a tough, grinded-out division, and that's the thing. The defenses typically will beat each other out. It will be ground and pound, and you know more often than not, you do see splits in that, right? But if you're looking at, let's say, on the DraftKings Sportsbook, the over-under Browns are a plus 125 to go over 9.5. Boy, the sportsbooks, they just know right where to put it, right? Because I'm thinking like 10-6, 9-7. That 9.5 seems just right in the middle. So that's an interesting line right there at 9.5. But yeah, 9-7 could certainly realistically win the AFC North. And the problem with that is, of course, if you don't win the division, then you're out. You're most likely looking at not a wild card or a playoff spot at all. So I think the Browns, with the addition of Odell Beckham Jr., you got Jarvis Landry. I know Antonio Callaway got suspended for 4 games, but he was going to be used a little bit more as a gadget return guy anyway. And then in the backfield, Nick Chubb, then Kareem Hunt coming back week 8. Like, my goodness. Like, it's or week 9 after 8 weeks off. You have a really great talent on offense, and Baker Mayfield, of course, at quarterback. And then the defense, heck, some people are saying the defense might be better than the offense.
Let's spin it back to our backyard here over in the Atlantic City area. A lot of Eagles fans in this area. Andy, I want to get your perspective, you know, because you're not in our backyard. So you're not, you know, entrenched in the environment of this team. What is a national guy's perspective on the Philadelphia Eagles this year? Someone who has no ties to the organization. Like, for example, we've all heard Louis Riddick saying he thinks Carson Wentz can win the MVP. Well, let's remember, Louis Riddick used to work in the Eagles organization, so he even has some indirect ties, even if he's being an objective analyst. So as someone who doesn't have any ties to the area, I want to know your unfettered perspective on the Philadelphia Eagles.
Well, I'll tell you this. You better hope Carson Wentz stays healthy, because Cody Kessler is the number 2. I know Cody Kessler. He was drafted by the Browns. Y'all ain't winning football games with Cody Kessler. He's never won a game. So Cody Kessler, that frightens me from the Wentz injury perspective. Now, here's my thinking on the Eagles. It's very simple to say as far as quarterback-driven league, and you need the QB to be healthy. But for the Eagles, that's really the case. You don't have the safety net of Nick Foles, And this is a real prove-it year for Carson Wentz. And I loved Carson Wentz coming out of the draft. And it was. All right, now you had that run where you were playing at an MVP level. Got hurt, team wins the Super Bowl. Get hurt again next year. You're going to have that injury tag slapped on your forehead if you don't come in and do it for a full 16 games this year. The organization has invested in you. They said they believe in you. So if Carson Wentz comes in and he plays at even a 90% level of the way he was playing in that Super Bowl year, Eagles are going to be right there for the division with the Dallas Cowboys, depending on how the Zeke Elliott situation plays out. I'm not as high on their wide receiver situation as some. I love Zach Ertz, of course, at tight end, but really like Alshon Jeffrey and Deshaun Jackson. Deshaun Jackson, boy, he hasn't played a full 16-game schedule since his last run with the Eagles in 2016, right? And at 32, so I think he might be a bit overvalued. Alshon Jeffrey's on the decline. Yet Nelson Aguilar, I like the revamped backfield. Jordan Howard, nice upgrade. J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, I'm really liking as the second-round pick. That's, if we're talking fantasy guys and a value for future DraftKings contests during the season, you keep an eye on Whiteside. But overall, it is going to depend really on Carson Wentz and the distribution of the football and how healthy he can be. If he is, this team's going to contend for the division, no doubt in my mind.
If I could play devil's advocate for a minute with that point, Carson Wentz did play all 16 games his rookie year. And yes, we overlooked the fact that two of the top 10 quarterbacks in the NFL today, I think most people would agree that Aaron Rodgers is in the top 5, if not number 1, and Andrew Luck is in the top 10. Like, we can agree on that, right?
Absolutely.
So you have two guys I just named who have both missed almost 20% of their starts in their career due to injuries. So, couldn't we say that, Carson Wentz, yeah, he does have an injury history, but so do other quarterbacks, unless your name is, Eli Manning, and even he's not even that great at this point. Guys do get injured. So couldn't I argue that the question of, well, if Wentz stays healthy is kind of a bloated one, considering that other quarterbacks around the league, outside of a few exceptions, do get injured as well?
And that's a fair point. My only thing is this is going to be his 4th year, and outside of that rookie year, the next 2 had significant injuries. And so where Aaron Rodgers, long career before that. Now, Andrew Luck, poor guy, thank goodness he finally got an offensive line in front of him, right? Because he missed all the other season. But you have those other players, like you had Andrew Luck, first 3 seasons played a full 16. So they had a lot. Now they're getting into that, or before, a couple years ago they were. But for Carson Wentz, it was 16. He was awesome. And then the couple of injuries. So is it bad luck? Is he injury prone? This is going to be the year where he proves it. And you know what? I enjoy watching him play. So I hope that he's able to, because the league's always more fun, and certainly fantasy football is more fun when you have more quarterback options. So this is going to be the prove-it year for Carson Wentz, because right now, I think you make an argument on either side of it, but ultimately, we don't know.
Andy McNamara joining me on the Boardwalk on the hotline on 97.3 ESPN. Follow him on Twitter at AndyMC81. Andy, from a fantasy football perspective, outside of Zach Ertz, I think most people agree Zach Ertz is the 1 or 2 fantasy football tight end. What are some other fantasy options on the Eagles this year that people should keep an eye on?
Well, I think you got to go Jordan Howard. And the fact being, you're going to have to overdraft likely true 3-down backs. And you can argue Jordan Howard, is he going to be a true 3-down back in Philadelphia? Well, Darren Sproles, this is a nice little swan song for him. That's nice. Jordan Howard and Miles Sanders is somebody you're going to keep an eye on. That's the perfect handcuff. Corey Clement, we know, can come in little scat back duties. But Miles Sanders, I like as the handcuff to Howard, maybe a late draft pick or off of the waiver wire. But you're going to have to go for Jordan Howard at some point, probably higher than you would like, especially if Melvin Gordon holds out. We don't know what's happening with Zeke Elliott. So if you're in your league, if you're having a fantasy draft, or if we get into the season and you're playing your DraftKings contest and those guys are still out or just getting back or whatever the case might be, you're going to have to look for running backs that are going to get significant touches and try to avoid the dreaded committee as long as possible. So I think Jordan Howard's value has to be higher. I mentioned a few minutes ago, J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. I like this guy a lot, man. 6'2", 225. Here's what's rare about him compared to a lot of other college wide receivers. Refined route runner. How often do we hear like DK Metcalf coming out of the draft? Oh, you can only run one or two routes. Well, not Whiteside. This guy, he's sharp, he's crisp, and then you work in that big-bodied angle. I kind of see him as a younger, more athletic Alshon Jeffrey than Alshon Jeffrey is at this point. So that's another guy you want to keep your eye on from a bit of a sleeper angle. But the top ones, obviously, you're going Howard, you're going Ertz. And then, hey, again, Carson Wentz, boy, if he stays on the field, that guy's going to be a stud, and he might be a steal, and people might wait on him because they're nervous about the injury in your fantasy draft, and we'll have to see what the DraftKings value is on him come week 1.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, you look at a guy like Arcega-Whiteside, whether he, bursts on the scene this year or next year. Talk about a guy, he had 14 touchdown catches in college last year. His quarterback threw 29 on the whole season. So he accounted for basically half of his team's passing touchdowns. That kind of tells you what kind of value that guy could be when he gets on the field. You mentioned the running backs.
Yes.
I find it interesting because I think this year might be one of those years where whether you're playing, daily fantasy with DraftKings, NFL daily fantasy, or you're playing, a year-round league with your buddies or on a bigger website like DraftKings, this may be one of those years where it's going to be more important than ever to find value at the running back because you mentioned Melvin Gordon, who knows? Ezekiel Elliott, who knows? Kareem Hunt, he's not even playing for the first 8 games, and who knows what he's going to be when he comes back. There's no guarantee that Le'Veon Bell is going to be Le'Veon Bell this year because he missed an entire year. I feel like there's so many questions with the running back. Heck, even a guy like Sony Michel, a lot of people think he's going to be a high upside, but what if the Patriots go back to the running back by committee and he doesn't get all the touches every week? I feel like running back is going to be one of those positions this year that you got to be really sure about the value that you're picking the guy in the round that you get them.
Yes, and you know what? Sony Michel is a great – I'm glad you brought him up for the Patriots because if you compare where he was last year, his fantasy numbers, like I know he flashed and he showed a lot of upside, but boy, I have a hard time trusting Bill Belichick in fantasy football when it comes to running backs, right? Like you look at Sony Michel and you have to go down the 25th ranked running back in fantasy in PPR format last year. He was behind Matt Breida. He was behind Aaron Jones. He was behind Kenyon Drake. Like these are he flashes, and maybe a Sony Michel is a better DraftKings DFS play than to depend on for a league-long season, right? Because you're going to sprinkle in James White, you're going to go Burkhead, who knows? But you're right. You got to try to look at all right where the value play is going to be, and if you have to go committee, it's going to be a bit of a guessing game. Like I'm looking right now, how often do you see a guy hold out, come back, and he gets injured? So if it's me, if I'm having my fantasy draft today, which I don't recommend, I always tell people, have it after the 3rd week of the preseason for your league long. But look at a Mike Weber for the Dallas Cowboys. You want to be owning the handcuffs for these guys. Austin Eckler for the Chargers with Melvin Gordon. You want to be looking at the backups who have flashed or have potential to. Mike Weber in training camp, I was watching him, man. He had, and I'm certainly not putting him in the same level or light as a Le'Veon Bell or Ezekiel Elliott. But so when I say this, his hesitation, his vision, and his plant and go reminded me a lot of Le'Veon Bell and Zeke Elliott in the camp. Now, once games start going for real, who knows? But that's somebody you want to watch for. I'm Mike Weber out of Dallas, somebody like that. Because you're right, it's going to be, once you get outside the big ones, or for your DraftKings contest, listen, if you don't want to be spending X amount of dollars, 10,000 plus on a Todd Gurley or whoever the case might be for the higher ends, you got to keep an eye out for those secondary players.
Andy McNamara joining the Boardwalk on the hotline. Andy, before I let you go, let's get into some of the great opportunities folks have. DraftKings NFL Daily Fantasy, as well as the DraftKings Sportsbook. Those in our area. Yeah. DraftKings Sportsbook is a big deal here in New Jersey. It's one of the biggest sportsbooks in the state right now. So let's get into some of the cool opportunities people have right now.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, let's start with the sports book. Here's what I love about it. It is very easy to use. You go on some sports book sites, it's all numbers all over the place, the format, it's hard to decipher, hard to use, whatever the case might be. DraftKings Sportsbook is perfect if you're a new bettor or if you're a seasoned bettor. Very simple, very easy. There's some prop plays as far as spread covers. You pick it right off the bat. So even preseason, you can go tonight. Chiefs 3.5-point favorites on the Bengals. You want to lay some money down on that, for example. You go over under 37, Dallas Cowboys and the San Francisco 49ers. And then you go, so it lines up everything easy, easy, easy. And that's what's most appealing to me. And of course, you can play all the sports and heck, even NFL preseason, make it a little more fun. Slap it on DraftKings Sportsbook. And then of course, hey, DraftKings.com for your daily fantasy. Here's what's cool. If you want to do fantasy in the preseason, what's the biggest problem, Josh, right? It's like, okay, well, how long are these guys going to play? So right. DraftKings made it easy. They've made everybody $5,500 salary. So you line it up, and that way you're not overpaid. You're not going to pay $11,000 for Pat Mahomes because Pat Mahomes is probably going to play a series. So that's the other fun part. I've actually really gotten into NFL preseason this year because the strategy of, okay, how much is the second string guys going to play? You're following different camps. Okay, who needs a little more time? Where are position competition battles? So you can do that on DraftKings.com, and then the regular season's all the fun.
Also, you can't forget the U.S. Open's coming up, so that's always a fun way to use a little parlays. I'm a big believer in like the 5-6 tennis player parlay at the U.S. Open. Some easy money to make on the DraftKings Sportsbook app.
Oh, sure. And that's the thing. If you're in the UFC, right, you can bet Ultimate Fighting Championship. You can go MMA. You can go soccer. English Premier League. Baseball, of course, right? You can do the great thing I like, too, for the daily baseball, whether it's DraftKings on the DFS fantasy side or the sportsbook, is for season-long baseball leagues, boy, that's a grind, right? You're going every day, 162 games. That's tough. But here, easy again. You pop it up right there. Yankees 1.5 run line favorite over the Blue Jays, and it gives you the starting pitchers. It lines everything up. It's so fun and easy. I just like sometimes just going on looking around, and then you just see something you like. They got the odds boost section too, which is pretty cool. So you got the Jets or Giants or Eagles to score a touchdown in regular season week 1. Limit $10 bet. Jets or Giants, it was minus 10,000. So you have different options for week 1, the no-brainer boost, they call it. So you can check that out. Like, there's just so many things to try it. So just DraftKings.com Sportsbook. Just go check it out.
Follow him on Twitter at AndyMC81. Works for TSN. He's a Browns fan. Don't hold that up against him.
Yeah.
NFL analyst for DraftKings, and he's joined us on the Boardwalk Honda hotline today. Andy, appreciate the insights. Hope you have you on as the season progresses.
Oh, Josh, anytime, man. I had a blast. Thank you.